There was a night, many years ago, when I sat alone in a small study lit by a single lamp, and I asked myself a question that had haunted me for the better part of 2 decades. I had spent those years walking among the giants of American industry, men who had built railroads where there were only forests, who had laid steel across continents, who had turned ideas into empires. And the question that would not leave me was this: why did the same universe that crushed one man seem to lift another upon its shoulders? I had assumed in my youth that the answer must lie in luck, or in birth, or in the cruel arithmetic of circumstance. But the longer I studied these men, the more I realized I had been looking at the matter upside down. The universe was not arbitrary, it was responsive. It was, in fact, the most loyal ally a human being could ever possess, but only to those who had learned the secret language with which to speak to it. I want you to consider for a moment the curious fact that nearly every great achiever I ever interviewed described, at some point in his life, a sense of being carried, not pushed, not pulled, carried, as though some invisible current beneath the surface of events had begun to move in his favor. Andrew Carnegie spoke of it. Thomas Edison alluded to it in his quieter moments. Henry Ford, that hard and stubborn farmer's son, once told me that he had never built a single thing of consequence without first feeling, in some interior chamber of his being, that the thing was already finished. And the most surprising part comes only now. Every one of these men, without exception, had passed through a season of utter ruin before that current began to carry them. They had been broken first, they had been emptied first, and only then had the universe seemed to take notice of them. This was not coincidence. I came to understand, after years of patient observation, that the universe responds to a certain quality of mind, a quality so rare that most men live and die without ever cultivating it. And the cultivation of this quality is what I want to speak of with you tonight, because if there is one truth I have come to hold above all others, it is this: the cosmos is not your enemy, and it is not indifferent. It is waiting. It has been waiting, perhaps, your entire life. And the moment you learn to align yourself with its currents, the moment you cease to fight it and begin to flow with it, you will discover that you have at your disposal a power so vast that the small struggles of your former life will seem, in retrospect, almost laughable. Let us begin where every true journey begins, with the recognition that something is wrong. The modern man, surrounded by more comfort than any king of antiquity ever dreamed of, walks through his days with a curious heaviness in his chest. He has health, he has shelter, he has more entertainment than he can possibly consume, and yet he feels somehow that he is at war with his own existence. He treats the universe as though it were a stubborn machine that refuses to deliver his orders. He pushes against it, he resents it. And the universe, which is far more sensitive than men suppose, responds to this hostility precisely as you would expect any intelligent presence to respond. It withdraws. It becomes, in fact, the very enemy that the angry man already believed it to be. Here begins the darkest game of the subconscious mind. For the universe does not give you what you want. It gives you what you are. And what you are is determined, almost entirely, by the secret conversation that runs beneath your conscious thoughts, that ceaseless inner murmuring which most men never bother to examine. If your inner voice is one of complaint, of suspicion, of quiet despair, then the universe arranges its affairs to confirm your suspicions. If your inner voice is one of confidence, of expectation, of magnetic certainty, then the universe arranges its affairs to confirm that as well. This is not mysticism. This is the most practical law I ever uncovered, and I watched it operate year after year in the lives of every man I ever studied. The principle of autosuggestion, the deliberate seeding of the subconscious mind with chosen beliefs, is the single most underestimated force in human existence. Consider what this means. You have been speaking to your subconscious all your life, whether you knew it or not. Every doubt you entertained, every fear you rehearsed, every quiet judgment you passed upon yourself in the mirror, all of it was instruction. You were teaching the deepest part of yourself what to expect, what to attract, what to permit, and the subconscious, which has no opinions of its own and no power to argue with you, took your instructions and began faithfully to build the life you had described. Most men, when they finally understand this, are seized by a kind of horror. They realize that the prison they have been complaining about is one they themselves built, brick by brick, with the careless words of their inner monologue. But what Hill said about this subject is deeply unsettling, and I want you to hear it plainly. The moment you grasp this truth, you also grasp the key to your own liberation. For if you constructed your prison with thought, then you can construct your palace with thought as well. The same faculty that bound you can free you. The same mind that betrayed you can become your most loyal servant. There is no man so lost that he cannot turn this around, but he must turn it around with the same patience and discipline with which it was first built. You did not become who you are in a single afternoon. You will not become who you wish to be in a single afternoon either, but the direction can change tonight. I want to tell you about a man I once met in the early years of my research. He was a salesman of modest talents who had failed at nearly everything he had attempted. By every external measure, he was an ordinary man whose life had reached an ordinary dead end. And yet, within 7 years, he had built a business that made him independently wealthy, not enormously wealthy, but free. When I asked him what had changed, he gave me an answer I have never forgotten. He said, "I stopped arguing with the universe. I had been telling it for 20 years that I was a failure, and it had been agreeing with me out of politeness. The day I started telling it something else, it started agreeing with that instead. This is the heart of the matter. The universe agrees with you. It is the most agreeable companion you will ever have. It will agree that you are unlucky if that is your conviction, and it will agree that you are blessed if that is your conviction, and it will arrange the events of your life to support whichever story you have chosen to tell. The detail most people overlook is hidden right here. The choice was always yours. It has been yours every single day. You have been choosing, even when you believed you were not choosing. Now let us speak of definite purpose, for no alliance with the universe is possible without it. The universe is a vast and powerful force, but it is not a fortune teller. It cannot give you what you have not asked for, and most men, if they were honest, would admit that they have never asked for anything specific in their entire lives. They have wished, they have hoped, they have entertained vague notions of what would be pleasant. But to ask in the deep sense, to formulate a definite major purpose with such clarity that it burns in your mind like a beacon visible from any point on the horizon, that is something else entirely. That is the act by which a man enters into partnership with the cosmos. Every great achiever I ever studied had a definite purpose. Not a goal, not a wish, not a daydream. A purpose so precise that he could describe it in a single sentence, and so consuming that he thought of it from the moment he woke until the moment he slept. Edison's purpose was to bring light into every home in America. Carnegie's purpose was to forge the steel that would build the modern world. Ford's purpose was to put a working man into an automobile. These were specifications, they were blueprints. And the universe, which has an extraordinary respect for blueprints, set about gathering the materials. The real turning point begins here in the precise moment when a man stops drifting and chooses. The act of choosing, of saying to oneself, this and not that, this and not the 1,000 other things I might have done, is one of the most sacred acts a human being is capable of. It is also one of the most terrifying, which is why so few men ever perform it. To choose is to commit. To commit is to risk failure. And most men, rather than risk a definite failure, prefer the slow, indefinite failure of a life never truly chosen. But I tell you plainly, the man who is not chosen has no ally. The universe cannot help him because he has not told the universe what kind of help he needs. Once you have chosen, once your definite purpose has been forged in the fire of decision, something remarkable begins to happen. Opportunities you had never noticed begin to appear. People you needed to meet begin to cross your path. Ideas that had been hiding from you begin to surface in your mind, often at strange hours, often in forms you did not expect. This is not magic, though it has the texture of magic. This is the law of correspondence at work. Like attracts like. A mind tuned to a particular frequency begins to draw toward itself the people, circumstances, and opportunities that vibrate at the same frequency. And the universe, far from being a passive backdrop, is the very medium through which this drawing together occurs. I once asked Carnegie what he believed was the secret of his success, and he told me something that took me many years to fully understand. He said the secret was not in him at all, it was in the men around him. He had built his fortune, he insisted, on the principle of the mastermind, the deliberate alliance of two or more minds working in perfect harmony toward a definite end. When two minds meet in true agreement, he told me, a third mind is born, an invisible mind, more powerful than either of the originals, with capacities that neither could possess alone. This third mind, he believed, was the channel through which the infinite intelligence of the universe poured itself into human affairs. I have tested this principle for 40 years, and I have never once seen it fail. The man who attempts to climb the mountain alone reaches, at best, the lower slopes. The man who climbs with a mastermind reaches summits that would have been physically impossible for any single climber. And the universe, which seems to take a particular interest in cooperation among its creatures, lavishes its favors upon such alliances. There is something about two or more human beings standing in genuine accord that opens a door in the fabric of reality. I cannot tell you why this is so. I can only tell you that I have watched it happen too many times to doubt it. What the lives of great achievers have been trying to tell us for centuries is this: you are not meant to fight the universe alone, and you are not meant to fight it at all. You are meant to enter into a friendship with it, a friendship as real and as demanding and as nourishing as any human friendship. And like any friendship, it requires certain qualities on your part. It requires faith, which is not the absence of doubt, but the presence of certainty about what you cannot yet see. It requires persistence, which is the daily refusal to abandon the path, even when the path appears to abandon you. It requires gratitude, which is the recognition that what you have already received is far greater than what you are still asking for. These three qualities, faith, persistence, and gratitude, are the currency of the cosmic friendship. The man who pays in this currency will find that the universe is generous beyond his capacity to receive. Let us speak now of fear, for no man becomes the ally of the universe while he remains the slave of fear. I identified, in my long study, 6 fundamental fears that haunt the human mind: the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of the loss of love, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. Every man carries some of these. Most men carry all of them. And the great tragedy is that these fears are not warnings of real dangers. They are the dangers themselves. They do not protect you from misfortune. They summon it. They are not your guardians. They are the most diligent saboteurs your life will ever know. Here is what I came to understand about fear. Fear is not the opposite of courage. Fear is the opposite of clarity. When you are clear about your definite purpose, when you know who you are and what you have been put on this earth to accomplish, fear has nowhere to take root. The fearful man is, almost without exception, a man who has not yet decided what he wants. He stands in the middle of his own life like a traveler at a crossroads who has refused to read the map, and so every direction looks equally dangerous to him. But the man who has chosen his road, even if it is a hard road, walks it with a quietness in his chest that the wandering man can only envy. The universe, I have observed, has a particular fondness for the unafraid, not because fearlessness is some moral virtue, but because fearlessness is a kind of openness, and openness is the condition under which the universe can deposit its gifts. A clenched hand cannot receive. A clenched mind cannot receive either. The man who walks through his days bracing for catastrophe creates around himself a kind of shell that even the most generous cosmic forces cannot penetrate. But the man who walks through his days expecting good, not naively, not foolishly, but with the steady expectation of one who has done his work and knows the harvest is coming, that man is a magnet for blessings he never specifically requested. What Hill said about this subject is deeply unsettling, and I will tell you now what I mean. The hardest truth I ever had to accept was that my circumstances were, in nearly every meaningful sense, my own creation. Not because I had consciously willed them, but because I had unconsciously expected them. The universe had been giving me with great precision exactly what I had been asking for in the silent vocabulary of my fears. I had been requesting failure, and it had been delivering. I had been requesting smallness, and it had been delivering. The day I changed my request, the universe began with equal precision to deliver something else. This was the most disturbing discovery of my professional life and also the most liberating. Now, I want to speak to you about something that I rarely discussed in my early writings because I knew it would be misunderstood. There exists, in the deepest chamber of the human mind, a faculty I came to call the sixth sense. This is not a mystical power reserved for prophets and saints. It is the capacity latent in every human being to receive direct guidance from the infinite intelligence that runs through all things. Most men have it dulled by noise, by anxiety, by the constant chatter of their lower minds. But it is there, and when a man begins to live according to a definite purpose, when he begins to clean the channels of his subconscious through the patient work of autosuggestion, the sixth sense begins to awaken. He begins to receive impressions that have no apparent source. He begins to know things he was never told. He begins, in short, to be guided. I do not ask you to believe this on my authority. I ask you only to test it. Live for 1 year as though the universe were your closest friend. Speak to it that way. Expect from it that way. Forgive it the way you would forgive a friend who occasionally disappoints you. Trust it the way you would trust a friend whose track record, over the long view, has been overwhelmingly in your favor. Do this for 1 year with sincerity, and tell me afterward whether anything has changed. I have made this experiment with myself and with hundreds of others, and I have yet to see it fail when it was undertaken in earnest. There is a quality of mind I want to introduce to you now, one that I believe is the master key to everything I have been describing. I call it the magnetic mind. The magnetic mind is not the mind that strives. It is the mind that draws. It does not chase what it wants. It becomes the kind of mind that what it wants chases. The men I studied who reached the highest summits did not appear in their later years to be straining at all. They appeared, in fact, almost relaxed. The world was coming to them, and when I asked them how they had cultivated this state, they told me, in slightly different words, the same thing. They had stopped fighting and started inviting. The man who fights the universe gets exactly the resistance he creates. The man who invites the universe gets exactly the cooperation he creates. This is the most practical law you will ever learn, and the world has hidden it from you in plain sight, because most men are too busy fighting to ever consider the possibility of inviting. I want you to consider tonight what it would mean to live for a single week as a man who invites rather than fights. The answers, I suspect, would surprise you. They surprised me when I first asked them of myself. Let me tell you about the principle of transmutation, which I touched on briefly in my early books but never explained fully. Every human being is given at birth a certain quantity of creative energy. This energy is the same energy that produces life itself, and most men throughout their lives squander it on lower pursuits. They burn it in anger. They burn it in lust. They burn it in petty rivalries and long-cultivated resentments. By the time they reach the age when their creative powers should be at their peak, they have nothing left to create with. But the man who learns transmutation, the deliberate redirection of creative energy from lower channels to higher ones, that man becomes, in his middle years, a kind of human furnace. He produces work. He produces wealth. He produces influence. And the universe, which loves nothing so much as the spectacle of a creator at full power, gathers around him to assist. This redirection is not repression. The energy is not denied. It is redirected. The man who suppresses his creative fire becomes bitter and small. The man who transmutes it becomes vast. The difference is in the channeling, not in the quantity of fire. And the channeling is a learned skill like any other. It cannot be acquired in a weekend, but it can absolutely be acquired by any man willing to give it his patient attention over the course of months and years. I want to return now to where we began, to that night long ago when I sat alone with the question that would shape the rest of my life. Why does the universe favor some men? After all these years, I can give you the answer in a single sentence. The universe favors the men who have learned to favor themselves in the highest sense of that word, who have chosen a definite purpose, who have aligned their subconscious with that purpose through autosuggestion, who have built around themselves a mastermind of allies, who have replaced fear with faith and effort with magnetism, and who have begun in the quiet hours to listen for the guidance of the infinite intelligence that runs through all things. This is not a teaching reserved for the gifted few. This is the birthright of every human being who is willing to claim it. The tragedy of the modern world is not that this knowledge has been lost, it is that it has been ignored. It is the same teaching that animated the Stoics, that ran through the lines of Emerson, that lived in the practices of the Eastern sages, that rose to the surface in the work of every great industrialist who built something lasting. It is the secret that is not really secret. It is hidden only because most men cannot bear to look at it directly. When was the last time you spoke to the universe as a friend? When was the last time you trusted it? Not because it had given you proof, but because trust itself was the proof you needed to offer first. When was the last time you sat in stillness long enough to hear what your own deeper mind was trying to tell you? These are the questions I want you to carry with you when you leave the warmth of these reflections and return to the ordinary noise of your days. Because ordinary noise is what most men spend their lives listening to, and ordinary noise is what most men hear. There is a current beneath the surface of your life. It has been there since the day you were born, and it will be there until the day you die. It runs in a certain direction, and it carries with it everything you need, every opportunity, every relationship, every resource your definite purpose will ever require. Most men spend their entire lives swimming against this current, exhausting themselves, blaming the water for their fatigue. But the current was never the enemy. The current was the gift. The day you turn around and face the direction it was already flowing, the day you stop fighting it and begin to ride it, is the day the universe stops being a stranger and becomes at last what it was always meant to be, your ally, your most powerful, most patient, most generous ally. The light is growing dim in this study, and I have spoken longer than I intended. But I want to leave you with one final thought, the thought that I believe contains everything else I have said. The universe is not waiting for you to become worthy of its help. It is waiting for you to become open to its help. The difference is everything. Worthiness is something you earn over time, and most men, judging by their own internal standards, will never feel quite worthy enough. But openness is something you can choose tonight, in this very hour, before you rise from where you are sitting. Openness is not earned. Openness is decided. So I will leave you with the question I have been carrying toward you from the very first sentence. When you rise from this chair, when you return to the small business of your life, when the doubts and the noises of tomorrow begin again, will you walk back into your days as a man who fights the universe, or as a man who has finally chosen to walk beside it? The choice, as always, is entirely yours. And the universe, as always, is waiting for your answer.